Revealed on my birthday. Dad sold my car to prioritize family. An unexpected, touching gesture. Jake Thompson rubbed the sleep from his eyes as he turned the final sketch for a coffee shop's rebranding project in his head. The idea flowed from him, bubbling with ambition, yet he could almost hear the clock ticking louder as the deadline loomed. He slid the laptop shut, shaking off the anxiety that had settled into his bones over the past months. Just as the thought of recognition began to blossom in his heart, he recalled the approaching milestone of his 31st birthday, an event that filled him with conflicting emotions. Uncertainty buzzed around him like a swarm of bees. Where was his career headed? What were his dreams, really? When he returned home, short on time but high on hopeful expectations, the sight that greeted him left him paralyzed. The empty space where his beloved car used to rest was now a void, manifesting every fear Jake had been wrestling with. The '95 Ford he'd received from Hank felt like more than just metal. It was a token of every sleepless night, every project submitted with clenching hands, the embodiment of autonomy and hard-won pride. Panic washed over him as he ran out to the driveway, each step intensified by the racing thought, "Where is it?" His father met him at the door, his sorrowful expression shattering Jake's perplexity. "I had to sell it, son, for Aaron's medical bills," Hank explained, voice low but heavy with resolved love. The words hung in the air, cold and unwelcome. Jake's mind screamed. Anger, betrayal, gratitude, each emotion collided like waves pounding against jagged rocks. First moral dilemma. Did Hank's sacrifice, an act born of necessity and care, diminish his own struggles? Was he expected to thank his father for stripping him of his independence? As he stood before Hank, muscles tense and chest tight, he felt the two sides of his heart pulling him between outrage and compassion. On one hand, everything his father had done was to prioritize family, emphasizing loyalty above self. But on the other, Jake was desperately clawing for independence, a shred of dignity in a world that didn't seem to remember his name. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake's gaze turned inward while his mind was a tempest. He was afraid of losing himself in this familial sacrifice, afraid of unraveling at the seams. Feeling like a puppet on a string threaded by loyalty, he questioned his right to. The facade of the perfect, supportive family shattered. He was left with jagged pieces of contrasting feelings. Hank's voice echoed in the background, a slipstream of sound against the cyclone of thoughts swirling in his head. Each word underscored the stakes. Jake's dreams hung in limbo, a frightening tautness beneath the surface. Resentment wrestled with affection for his father. How could he prioritize family when every sacrifice felt like an anchor, holding him down when he desperately wanted to swim? And yet, visions of his sister's suffering wove a tapestry of compassion that made his heart quiver. As the sun dipped low in the sky, illuminating their troubled expressions, Jake was struck by an eerie sense of the unknown. Would sacrifice for the sake of family swallow his dreams whole, or forge a new path he couldn't yet comprehend? Torn between loyalty and independence, he stood before an unclear horizon, teetering on the edge of his conflicted reality as the shadows of doubt encroached upon him, leaving him suspended in a tumult of choices, just as the first rays of his birthday sun began to break through. The morning sunlight poured through Jake's window, but instead of warming his spirit, it felt like an intruder. Was it wrong to crave ambition while feeling burdened by familial duty? He dressed in a haze, each article of clothing a reminder of the responsibilities he hadn't chosen. The design he had been struggling to finalize demanded attention, yet the empty space where his Ford had been echoed louder than any sketch or pattern. As he sat at the kitchen table, his laptop glared back at him as though it were judging his delay. He could hear Hank in the other room, tending to his sister. The air was thick with unspoken words. Should he confront his father? Did he even have that right? The anger simmering inside him clashed with an overwhelming sense of guilt. He couldn't shake the thought that while he stewed over his car, Aaron's battle was infinitely more critical. But what good was it to be weighed down by obligations, to be stripped of autonomy? A relentless knot formed in his stomach as he recalled the way his father's expression cracked with hurt. Would confronting Hank reveal the betrayal Jake felt, or would it draw them closer? Ideas churned in his mind, each one more haunting than the last. The design project in front of him suddenly felt hollow. He clicked through the files, searching for inspiration, but each iteration reflected his doubts back at him. What if he used this moment, this turmoil, as the catalyst for his creativity? The thought sparkled, illuminating a path through his chaos. Maybe this situation wasn't a setback. Perhaps it was an opportunity to prove himself. Peel back the layers of expectation and create something true, not just for the project at hand, but for himself. Less than an hour later, immersed in the rhythm of keystrokes and rapid sketches, Jake felt energy return to his bones. This wasn't just about the coffee shop anymore. As the ideas flowed, he began envisioning a brand that wasn't shackled to external appearances, something that resonated with honesty, something that told a story much deeper than colors and fonts. It was a lifeline thrown to himself amid the storm. His father's voice broke his concentration, distant but firm. "We need to talk." Jake's heart raced. The urgency in Hank's tone left a dull ache somewhere between hope and fear. In a few steps, he was in the living room, confronting the man whose decisions gnawed at his sense of self. Despite the words that had to be said, the atmosphere felt charged with electricity. "Jake, I know you're angry," Hank began, eyes earnest, searching for understanding. "But I did what I thought was best for our family. I didn't expect you to—" "Expect me to what, Dad? Sit quietly while you make decisions that impact my life, my career?" The words tumbled out before Jake could stop them. Hank's brow furrowed, but there was a flicker of recognition. "This isn't about just you. It's about all of us. Can't you see that?" Could he see that? In that moment, Jake's mind was a battleground of conflicting emotions. The confrontation wasn't just about the car. It was about him stepping into his own skin, about making his own decisions, even when they clashed with the expectations of love. And now, as the light shifted against the walls, Jake felt time slipping away once more. The questions circled in his mind like a whirlwind. Was it time to redefine who he was? Would he choose independence, or would he allow the sacrifice to reshape him? As the tension mounted, the potentially defining moment of his birthday approached, its gravity weighing upon him like a choice that hung in the air. He took a deep breath, prepared to lay bare his desires, to carve out a space for his ambitions. But before he could find the words, an unexpected noise erupted from the back of the house, the sudden crash of something fragile breaking. His stomach sank again, sensing upheaval just when clarity felt so near. What lay behind that door? Jake's heart quickened, and he instinctively moved toward the sound, drawn by urgency and a growing need to confront the unraveling threads of his life. Jake hesitated at the threshold, his mind racing. The crash echoed in his ears, and the realization of more chaos looming felt like a weight pressing down on him. The decision to face his father felt crucial now, but what awaited him beyond this door? With a deep breath, he pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The sight that greeted him sent a shiver through his spine. Aaron lay on the floor, the remnants of a vase littering the area around her, pieces of porcelain sparkling like shards of her own struggle. The fracture of the vase mirrored the fraying harmony of their lives. It was beautiful and tragic all at once. "Aaron!" He rushed to her side, kneeling to assist her. "Are you okay?" She looked up, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. I wanted to do something, anything. Her voice trembled, and Jake felt the familiar pang of helplessness welling up inside him. Help? You don't need to do everything yourself, he said softly, trying to conceal the tension from the earlier confrontation with Hank. He gathered her up in his arms, instinctively hugging her tight as if to shield her from the world's cruelty. Dad said he needed more time to figure out things with my treatment, she sniffled, clutching onto him. I thought maybe if I cleaned up, I could make it easier for everyone. The burdens of family weighed heavier than any design he could create. He understood Aaron's desire to contribute, to feel useful amidst the chaos, but a gnawing frustration bubbled within him as he thought about how each of their roles had shifted seamlessly into a choreographed dance of sacrifice and suffering. Was it not entirely their choice? I get it, Jake replied, his voice steadier as he gently disentangled from her grasp to start picking up the pieces of the vase scattered on the ground. But sometimes it's okay to lean on others. We're in this together, right? As they cleaned up, a deeper realization began to surface within him. Maybe this was the moment he could take charge, not just for himself, but for Erin too. She needed strength. All of them did. And maybe he had been too caught up in his anger at Hank. Hey, hold on. He paused as an idea sparked in his mind. What if I asked Dad if we could work on this together for a change? He wouldn't say no to helping you. And maybe we can brainstorm some ideas for your therapy that relate to my designs. It could be something creative, something worth sharing. Erin nodded, a glimmer of hope dawning in her weary eyes. You think so? I know so, he affirmed. The idea felt less like a burden and more like an opportunity to carve out his own identity, to innovate within the confines of familial duty. It was a plan, one that could allow them to work together and serve as a foundation for healing. Just as resolve washed over Jake, Hank appeared in the doorway. A mix of emotions crossed the older man's face, relief and concern blending into a quiet remorse. Jake, he began, voice barely a whisper, I didn't mean for it to come to this. Jake stood straighter, his earlier determination surging back to the forefront. Neither did I. How do we make it right? But before Hank could respond, another crash erupted from the kitchen, a harbinger of yet another challenge to face. The family still hadn't reached stability. This time, Jake felt something shift. They were starting to face their chaos together. At that moment, a small fire ignited within Jake. Perhaps facing Hank wasn't about just confronting him. It was the beginning of a new path for their family, one drenched in honesty and vulnerability. The tumult of birthdays past had morphed into a yearning for reclamation, not just for his ambitions, but for relationships that had been stretched thin. With his heart racing, Jake clenched his fists, ready to charge into the chaos yet again. The future was still murky, but perhaps, together, they could redefine what it meant to be a family. The weight of the unfinished conversation about his aspirations hung thick in the air. Would Hank see his intention to grow, or would it shatter with further revelations? The question gnawed at Jake as he braced himself for another confrontation, wondering if this holiday could finally be a turning point, or if it would plunge him deeper into the quicksand of discontent. Jake's pulse quickened as he watched Hank step hesitantly into the room, the air thick with unuttered words and tension. Each clash with his father had heaped another layer of resentment onto their already fragile relationship. It felt impossible to bridge the gap between their contrasting worlds, Hank's stern, pragmatic approach to family matters, and Jake's artistic, often idealistic vision. The prospect of engaging in another round of confrontation loomed over him. What happened in the kitchen? Hank asked, a wary glance darting toward Erin, who remained silently seated on the floor. Jake's heart sank as he remembered the clattering dish that had precipitated the night's chaos, a small symbol of their untapped potential for harmony. I'd rather talk about us, Jake replied firmly, grounding his voice between uncertainty and defiance. If we don't address what's really happening, going back and forth will only get us deeper into trouble. Hank's brow furrowed as he crossed his arms. You're right, we can't keep avoiding the issue. You need to focus on your future, Jake, not on my mistakes. Something shifted in Jake's chest. Mistakes. Unraveled memories flooded in. Memories of the boy with big dreams and a father who had slowly diminished them, burying them beneath rationalizations and caution. Dad, do you even know what I want? The words rushed out, impulsive yet purposeful. It's not just about stability or responsibility anymore. It's about living up to my potential, my creativity. I can't keep sacrificing my aspirations thinking I'm doing what's best for everyone. Hank's expression shifted, a crack forming in his controlled facade. You think I don't want what's best for this family? He challenged, his tone rising slightly. I've put everything into providing for you and Aaron, Jake. It's not just an academic pursuit. It's about making sure you both have a future. You're protecting us into a cage, Jake shouted back, each word leaving a mark, pushing the conversation into territory where the authentic Jake began to emerge. I need more from you, Dad, not just status or stability, but understanding and support. Why can't we work together on these things? Why can't you even trust that I can create a life that's valid? Time stood still, the air choked with Jake's fervent plea. For a fleeting moment, he felt weightless, liberated by his own sincerity. But just as quickly came the rush of uncertainty. Could he really unlock a change in Hank? Would this confrontation bend the barriers or break them altogether? Hank's hands dropped to his sides, and for a heartbeat, Jake saw his father's usual stoicism melt away. Regret, concern, perhaps even admiration flickered across Hank's features. "You're right, son," he muttered, voice thick with the weight of vulnerability. "I've only tried to keep us afloat, but balancing everything has made me forget to listen to you." The admission landed heavily in the room, each individual on their own path of revelation. Jake struggled with the paradox of his father's admission. Was it a sign of progress or merely another distraction from their chaos? The conversations they had avoided created a tangled web that needed untangling. "Then let's change this," Jake pressed, hope igniting from the ashes of anger. "Let's start now. Help me plan something that combines my art and Aaron's treatment, something that engages all of us. Let's establish a new foundation together." Hank shifted slightly, uncertainty lingering in the depth of his expression as he considered the proposal. "And what if it doesn't go how we want? What if we mess up?" "Messing up is part of growing," Jake said, his voice growing steadier. "It's time we embrace the chaos. We can't shy away from it any longer." Jake watched as Hank's posture softened, the fight dwindling. This was a turning point, and neither could afford to let it slip away. But just as conviction teetered on the precipice, the echoes of the earlier crash ricocheted in Jake's mind, a reminder that chaos wasn't done with them yet. A sudden crash in the kitchen made them shift their attention. The clamor felt stark in the air of reconciliation. Distraught yet resolute, Jake realized he had a choice to make: continue to face the turbulent storms of family life, or to forge a path that truly honored his creativity and dreams amidst the upheaval. As he steeled himself for whatever lay ahead, Jake felt a flicker of hope deep within him, one that urged him to charge forward. But as the chaos drew nearer, he wondered if this moment of connection would prove enough to sustain them through the turmoil, or send them careening back into the shadows. The rattle of shattered glass echoed through the house, the remnants of an overturned plate joining the frenzy of emotions that surged within Jake. Instinctively, he turned towards the kitchen, where the chaos crescendoed into muffled shouts. Just as he prepared to intervene, Hank's hand grasped his wrist firmly. A tension sparked between them, an unspoken understanding that this moment could either unite or fracture them further. "Let's focus," Hank urged, catching Jake's eye with a mixture of caution and resolve. "What you proposed, working on something together, we should start mapping it out right away." Jake swallowed hard, his internal landscape swirling with hopes and doubts. Could this really be the shift they desperately needed? There was a flicker of determination igniting within him, fueled by his father's newly found openness. It was an invitation he hadn't anticipated, yet now seemed essential to pursue. Okay, let's do this. We could create an art project that includes Erin's input, maybe even something that expresses her feelings about what she's going through, he suggested, his mind racing to envision possibilities. The notion of incorporating Erin was crucial. Her silent strength had always been an undercurrent of resilience that bound them together. Hank nodded slowly, his brow furrowing in thought. And I could reach out to community organizations that focus on, I don't know, art therapy? Resources that can help us refine what you have in mind. The idea took root, germinating within the space between them. Each proposed movement from Hank nodded with Jake's dreams, and he felt a burgeoning sense of agency. Here was a chance to turn aspiration into action, to involve his father in a way they'd never attempted before. Yet the doubt lingered. Could they genuinely navigate the choppy waters that lay ahead? As Jake looked at Hank, he realized that reconciling their differences would take more than planning. It would require labor and perseverance. They needed to dig deeper, to shed the flawed perceptions of one another they had carried for too long. "Dad," he said, his voice a low murmur to navigate the latent tensions still lingering in the room. "There's something else. I need you to understand that my art isn't just a whim. It's my attempt to communicate, not only my dreams, but the fear and frustrations I feel. It's how I process this family, the mess, the love, everything." Hank shifted his weight, processing the weight of those words. Jake saw a flicker of comprehension cross his father's face. This was the germ of what could ultimately heal them, a structure to support his artistic foundation while giving Hank the assurances he needed as well. "Maybe I've ignored that part of you," Hank conceded, almost hesitantly. "I've prioritized keeping things steady, making decisions that felt responsible, protecting you in ways I thought were best, instead of considering what you truly needed." Driving the realization home, Jake felt an unexpected rush of empathy emerge through the cracks of their turbulence. They were both clinging to old understandings of family, paralyzed by fear and miscommunication. "Let's draft a plan then. We can set small goals, things we can work toward week by week. It'll give us all a focus outside of whatever happens around us," he suggested, emboldened by the responsibility and collaboration emerging between them. The atmosphere shifted slightly, lighter, yet charged with unspoken ambition and potential. But the chaos in the kitchen wouldn't let them off easy. Clanging of pots and muffled laughter chased away their collective moment, pulling them back into reality, the realities they were tenuously attempting to mend. As Jake absorbed the scene in his father's eyes, the ambition began coalescing into an undeniable truth. In the mess of their emotions and miscommunication, a form of clarity was taking shape. Still, amidst this hope, uncertainty loomed. With Christmas just days away and a plan still hazy of execution, Jake had a painful realization. What if, against all odds, Hank's gesture turned out to be another well-intentioned misstep? As they moved to the kitchen, Jake's heart pounded with equal parts excitement and dread. Something was shifting, but there were still so many unresolved pieces. He needed answers, not just hope. When he entered the kitchen, the sight that awaited them felt like the culmination of all their tension. Erin was drenched in a cascade of flour, a fraction of laughter bursting from her as she tried to juggle two mixing bowls. Jake froze, the moment striking him with a cynical absurdity embodied in innocence. Would they crumble under their histories, or could this chaotic moment ignite the foundation they were starting to build together? Jake opened his mouth to engage with Erin, an instinctive wish to capture this spontaneity before stepping further into their collective journey. But the weight of doubt leered, distorted and opaque, like the flour dusting the air around them. He would have to face the truth of that feeling instead. It was drawing closer, revealing a complexity that could either bring them together or lay them bare once more. Jake's gaze lingered on Erin, her laughter a balm in a room that had been shrouded in tension. The flower on her face, bright against the chaos, was emblematic of how absurdly normal life could still be despite the storm swirling around them. He took a moment to breathe in the scene, letting it seep into his consciousness. This was family. Yet, beneath the warmth of laughter, he felt a gnawing need to address the reality that continued to darken their newfound clarity. "Aaron," he began, forcing himself to engage, "are you okay?" The question spilled out amidst the laughter and mess, a way to connect the fragmented pieces of their lives. She stopped juggling the bowls and gave him a side glance, a flash of vulnerability, before her lips curled into a smile. "Just a little flower explosion," she said cheerfully. Yet, even her bright tone couldn't mask the shadow behind her eyes. Jake knew that humor was her armor. As he stepped closer, a sense of responsibility settled over him. The art project they had envisioned was not merely a creative outlet, it was a lifeline. "Do you want to help us with something special for Christmas? We could create something that represents us, your strength, the things we feel but don't say." This proposal was a bridge, an olive branch extended through the medium of creation. Instinctively, he hoped it would resonate. "Really? That sounds cool." Erin's enthusiasm felt genuine. Her eyes sparkled as flour dusted her lashes, and that flicker of light was enough to galvanize Jake. It sparked a resolve within him to persist, to transform every bit of turmoil into something tangible. Art could be the antidote. Beauty could emerge from chaos. "Let's meet up later tonight to brainstorm," Jake suggested, mentally thawing the hesitations that had held him back. Ideas flew through his mind, images of vibrant colors and strokes that could embody their family dynamic, both broken and whole at once. In that moment, though an uncertain path loomed ahead, Jake felt the dim glimmer of purpose. Yet, deep inside, resentment still lurked. Hank's earlier words haunted him. Was his father really ready to change? Or was this just another momentary reprieve from the storms that raged beneath their strained relationship? Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen, the notification glaring back at him. Hank's number flashed, and intuition prickled at the back of his mind. Was this another call to prioritize responsibility? Curiosity gnawed at his resolve. At the same time, a bubbling anger festered. The past weeks had stripped both father and son bare before him, exposing each other's flaws without allowing space for growth. What if this was an opportunity to confront those tensions head-on without backing down? He stepped away from Aaron, stealing a moment alone before responding to the call. "Jake?" Hank's voice sounded strained on the other end. "I know you're probably busy. I wanted to see if we could talk. There's something I need to tell you." There it was, the opportunity he had unconsciously waited for, but dreaded. It was both a call to accountability and a precarious step toward reconciliation. His instinct rebelled against the possible fallout. After all, conversations like these had never ended well. But with anger simmering and hope crackling like a lit fuse in his gut, Jake recognized that there was no better time than now. "Okay," Jake replied, threading determination through his words. "Let's talk." As he settled into a corner of the kitchen, grappling with the weight of what this conversation might yield, he couldn't escape the pulling urge for clarity in the clutter of their lives. Would this be the breakthrough they so desperately needed, or just another broken promise wrapped in complexity? As Jake prepared to face Hank, he understood that in these next few moments, they would either find a way to build a mosaic of shared truths or risk shattering everything again. The stakes felt staggering, the air thick with anticipation, as they stood on the brink. What revelation awaited from Hank? Jake held his breath. This could very well determine the course of their lives together. Jake's heart raced as he took a seat at the small kitchen table, the smooth wood cool beneath his fingertips. The air was charged with an uneasy tension, a close cousin to hope. He could feel the weight of their past pressing heavily between them, its outlines blurring with the memories of arguments and missed connections. This was more than just a conversation. This could be a reckoning. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying his breath. The faint sounds of laughter from Aaron in the other room reminded him of what was at stake. He silently urged himself to stay grounded, to not let anger yoke him into a reactionary response. This was about growth, not just for him, but potentially for Hank too. What if they could weave a new narrative, one threaded with honesty instead of the deceit that had marred their history? "Jake," Hank started, his voice breaking slightly. "There's no easy way to say this." The hesitation in his tone reverberated through Jake, setting off a chain reaction of emotions. "I sold your car." The words hit Jake like splintering glass. A rush of anger surged within him, but he forced it down, stifling any impulsive retorts that threatened to escape. Instead, he focused on what the action represented. The car had symbolized independence, the remnants of his teenage years still tangled in its used upholstery. Losing it felt like losing a stake on his autonomy, not just a vehicle, but a part of who he believed he was. "Why would you do that?" Jake's voice was steadier than he felt. "Do you think that's okay?" "Listen," Hank replied, his tone edged with urgency. "I know it sounds drastic, but I didn't do it just to save money. I needed to prioritize the family's needs. I wanted to show you that family comes first, that we have to sacrifice sometimes." "Sacrifice?" Jake interrupted, frustration threading through each word. "You mean you took away my choice and didn't even discuss it with me? That's not sacrifice, that's control." The silence that ensued felt profound, stretching uncomfortably between them. Jake's pulse quickened. The familiar thrill of confrontation surged. It whispered promises of conflict, but also echoed the potential for breakthrough. Hank shifted in his seat, a hint of resignation in his posture. "It was supposed to be a surprise. I thought by prioritizing things now that we could focus on rebuilding our relationship. I didn't think you'd need the car anymore, not when we're trying to come together as a family." The complexity of Hank's words crystallized Jake's frustrations into something more profound. This wasn't just about a car. It was about the desperate need for connection and the misguided attempts to forge that bond through heavy-handed means. Jake felt a pang of empathy nestled amongst his anger. He found himself grappling with two conflicting emotions. He wanted to scream about lost independence, the oversight of his father's choice, yet he also recognized the bitter truth within Hank's intentions. What if this was Hank's way of acknowledging the family's fractures? Was there a chance that beneath the surface, a desire to forge a real connection lay hidden? "Maybe you should have talked to me first," Jake suggested, trying to rein in the tumult brewing inside him. The walls of resentment seemed to crack, just slightly. "I'm learning," Hank said, his voice softer now, a frail apology layered within his words. "I've made mistakes. I just want to improve. I thought doing something bold would bring us together, not push us apart." Jake's cynicism softened, mingling with a newfound resolve. Perhaps their line of communication needed redefining, just like the roles they had fallen into over time. He felt a flicker of hope, a small daring thought that they might carve a new path in a relationship that had often gnarled in the shadows of expectation. "Let's talk more about this," Jake replied carefully, steering the conversation away from anger towards something constructive. "We need to discuss what support really looks like. It can't just be replacing one thing for another." "Okay," Hank nodded, the weariness in his eyes reflecting a yearning for understanding. "I want to learn. I want us to find a way back to each other." As they began deliberating their next steps, a familiarity began to settle, a shared hope amidst the acknowledgement of their past failures. All those fragmented pieces of their relationship felt less far away, ready to be reshaped. But as they talked, Jake couldn't shake the lingering doubt. Was this change genuine or simply another layer of Hank's manipulation? With uncertainty hanging in the air, Jake recognized this conversation could shift everything they had known. If Hank truly intended to change, Jake knew putting his faith in that hope would require confronting even deeper truths. How would they separate intent from history? But before he could voice these concerns, Hank looked up, his eyes blazing with a kind of determination Jake had rarely seen in his father. "There's something else I need to tell you, something that might change everything." Jake braced himself. Uncertainty had shifted from a threat to a portal of possibility. What revelation lay ahead, ready to redefine their journey? Jake's heart thudded in his chest as he awaited Hank's words. The tension in the room thickened, the air crackling with the implications of what was about to be revealed. Hank took a deep breath, as if summoning strength from within, and in that brief moment, Jake's mind raced with possibilities. What could possibly be more drastic than selling his car? "I didn't just sell your car to save money or prioritize the family's needs," Hank finally began, his voice trembling slightly. "I did it because I want to make a change, not just for you, but for all of us." His gaze fell, as if he expected rejection. "I want to show you that I'm committed to rebuilding our family, to being better, and it all starts with honesty." Jake felt a stark mix of hope and frustration. Hank's desire for change resonated deeply, yet the path to that change was littered with the shards of their shared history. "What do you want to say? What else is there to discuss?" His voice was measured, reflecting a balance between anger and curiosity. "I've been thinking about everything, about my past decisions, our estrangement. I won't pretend that I can fix things overnight, but I want to take responsibility." Hank's eyes lifted to meet Jake's with a vulnerability that demanded acknowledgement. Jake's mind swirled. Responsibility. It was a concept he had come to grapple with over time, particularly regarding his father, but it felt entirely different now. "How exactly do you plan to start?" Jake asked. If Hank's sincerity was genuine, then this was a critical moment to demand tangible actions. Accountability was the cornerstone of any relationship. "There are things I've hidden from you, financial problems, enormous mistakes, and the fact that I never prioritized being a father," Hank confessed. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, laden with regret. "I can't ask for your trust, but I can start being transparent." Jake felt a ripple of something unexpected swell inside him. Was it empathy? Could he mesh his journey toward independence with his father's efforts to rekindle their past? "What do you mean by being transparent?" he pressed, intrigued yet cautious. "I want to show you our finances, the reality of our situation. I owe you that." Hank took a breath, abandoning any pretense of comfort. "What happened with your car was a wake-up call. I didn't talk to you because I was afraid of your reaction, of losing you even more. Maybe if I had opened up before, we could have found solutions together." A slight shift in perspective fluttered through Jake's mind. Hank's admission didn't erase the frustration of losing his car, but it painted the decision in shades he hadn't considered. "So you think that sharing your failures will create some sort of bond?" Jake challenged, keeping his walls fortified. "I think it's a start," Hank replied earnestly. "I want to face my mistakes with you rather than pushing them away. Look, I know I failed you before, but this time I don't want to lead with fear. I want to lead with honesty." Jake felt the room shift as he wrestled with Hank's words. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a crossroads for both of them. The urge to explore this new sincerity battled with his instinct to shield himself from further hurt. "If we're going to do this, then I want in on the whole picture. I'm willing to be part of this, but we both need to take responsibility moving forward." His voice was firm, a decision made. "Deal," Hank said, renewed determination lining his features. "But trust won't come easily, I know that. Let's figure this out together." He extended his hand as a gesture of good faith. Jake considered it for a moment, torn between an overwhelming desire to protect himself and a curiosity about this new path being laid before them. Finally, he reached out, his hand meeting Hank's, and in that moment, Jake felt a sliver of hope pierce through the jagged shadows of doubt. But as the air settled around them, an undercurrent of anxiety whispered promises of potential conflict. What if the truth revealed was more than he could handle? What if Hank's past mistakes spiraled beyond what any reparative efforts could fix? With a reluctant understanding that their journey was only just beginning, Jake nodded slowly. Let's start then. But as they dove into the details, a thought gnawed at him. How would he compartmentalize Hank's past failures while forging a new reality? And what else lay buried beneath their history, waiting to unfurl, potentially altering the course of their newfound connection? Just as discussions began to unfold, Hank looked up, a hint of fear flickering in his eyes. Jake, there's something I haven't told you about our financial issues. It's deeper than you think. Jake braced himself. This felt like it could redefine everything once again. What secrets, if uncovered, would haunt not only their past, but their future as well? The shadows of uncertainty lingered in the room as Jake's mind churned with Hank's ominous words. The idea that there were layers to uncover filled him with a sense of dread. The stakes just escalated in a way he hadn't anticipated. Hank's gaze held a mix of apprehension and resolve, as if he were standing at the edge of a cliff, afraid to jump, but knowing he must. What do you mean it's deeper? What else is going on? Jake's words emerged sharper than intended, a reflection of the urgency building within him. Each second stretched into a taut silence, amplifying the weight of their shared history. Hank cleared his throat, his hands fidgeting with the edge of the table. It's about money, yes, but it goes beyond that. I've made some choices. Bad investments, poor decisions. I didn't want you to worry, but now we're at a breaking point. I need you to understand the full reality. Jake inhaled slowly, trying to contain the swirling emotions threatening to spill over. Part of him was fearful about what these revelations might entail for their lives, but another part felt the stirrings of a more proactive impulse. This was no longer just about confronting the past. It was a wake-up call to reshape the future. Okay, then show me, Jake challenged, driven by a mixture of fear and determination. Don't spare any details. I need to know why you think this is the right approach. With a nod, Hank began to lay out the transactions that had unraveled their financial stability, spreading documents across the table like a somber deck of cards revealing bad hands. As they navigated through spreadsheets and receipts, Jake felt his chest tighten with every figure Hank recited. They weren't just numbers. They were symbols of years lost to neglect and failed attempts at reconciling priorities. Why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have figured this out together, Jake challenged. Burst out, struggling to suppress the swell of resentment. Hank's expression darkened. I didn't want to burden you, Jake. I thought I could handle it on my own. But the truth is, I didn't want to face my failures in front of you. As the words hung in the air, something in Jake shifted. The idea that Hank had tried to protect him, and yet, in doing so, had created a chasm, was a complex realization. He recognized the instinct to shield a loved one, even when it led to manipulation through silence. Then let's work together, Jake proposed, a newfound resolve igniting within him. I don't want to be a bystander anymore. If we're doing this, I want to help find solutions. The vulnerability of the moment carved a space for Jake's growth. He realized that accepting presence in the seams of their dysfunction was just as crucial as processing loss. Hank met his gaze, the faintest glimmer of hope sparking in his eyes. Are you sure? It's not going to be easy, and there might be more than just finances to address, Hank warned, a gravity settling over his words. Honestly, it could hardly get more complicated than it already is, Jake replied, cracking a half-smile that caught Hank off guard. I think we're already dealing with layers of chaos. With their dialogue turning from confrontation to collaboration, seconds morphed into a genuine plan for action. They took a step beyond the documents strewn before them, mapping out a gradual movement towards stability, emotional and financial. As Jake felt a sense of agency emerge, a question loomed larger than the specific details of their newfound partnership. What kind of healing could they navigate together, given their tumultuous past? Could this be the threshold for not only recovering, but rediscovering their roles as father and son amid the ruins? Amid the fervor of planning, the old wounds felt less like barricades and more like pathways to understanding. However, as Jake cast a wary glance at Hank, he couldn't shake the underlying sensation that this was merely the first step in a maze they'd only begun to resolve. "Just promise me one thing," Jake said, his voice steadying. "If there's anything else I should know, you need to tell me now. No more secrets." Hank hesitated, the moment stretching out as Jake watched his father's face flicker through various emotions. Finally, he spoke, the weight in his voice palpable. "Jake, there's one more thing about those financial issues, but we need to sit down for a more detailed discussion. It could change everything." As dread snaked its way back into Jake's gut, he felt the cautious optimism of the day teetering on the brink. This next revelation felt immense, like a tidal wave about to crash. His heart raced, bracing for whatever came next. Would this final piece of information shatter the fragile foundation they had begun to build, or could it somehow illuminate the way forward despite the storm? Jake sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding in anticipation of the revelation that could alter everything. The tension between him and Hank hung heavy in the air, the distance of their past momentarily bridged by their recent breakthroughs. He swallowed hard, wrestling with hope and trepidation. An unfamiliar sense of agency buzzed within him, born from the uncertain collaboration that had emerged. Hank took a deep breath, the gravity of the moment settling on his shoulders. "It's about Erin," he began, each word weighed down by concern. "She's been spending time at specialty hospitals and undergoing treatments that are costly. I didn't tell you about the debts because I wanted to fix them on my own. You know how I am." Jake felt the ground beneath him shift. The implications were extensive and daunting. If money had been a barrier to their happiness as a family, Erin's health and well-being were now at the center of their unraveling. "Dad, why didn't you let us in? We could have helped," Jake protested, the roar of indignation curling around his resolve. Hank's voice faltered, the tremor of guilt evident. "I thought protecting you would keep you safe from the burdens I carried. I was trying to handle it alone while keeping us afloat. But now, with the financial strains and Erin's needs, it's become untenable. I don't want her to lose hope, and I don't want you to resent me." The admission struck Jake with raw intensity. It was a pivotal moment, the culmination of sacrifice that had lived in silence between them for too long. The picture of his sister's struggle painted a reality more consuming than the emptiness of his car's absence. Jake blinked rapidly, emotions swirling under the surface. It was no longer just about rebellion or aspirations. It was about hope and love, resilience amid chaos. He thought of Erin, of how she had fought through her challenges but was now standing at another precipice of need. "We have to figure out a plan, Dad, not just for finances, but for her recovery," Jake asserted, determination surging through him. This was a mission worth pursuing. "Let's make it a family project. If we all lean in, it might lighten the load." Hank nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a mixture of acknowledgement and remorse. It felt surreal that such a catastrophe could be the catalyst for genuine unity. "You're right. Erin deserves better than the shadows we've clung to out of mistrust." There was an awakening in the way he spoke, a realization that they could emerge from the depths of their secrets. They shifted gears, drawing up an actionable plan over the next few hours, discussing potential resources for her therapy, budgeting their finances, and leveraging artistic ideas Jake had envisioned for a community project to raise funds for Erin's treatment. Each session cultivated ideas that were more than just plans. They were promises to one another, reflections of a family navigating their course through adversity. As twilight enveloped their home, Jake felt a notable weight lift from his shoulders. Perhaps this was the breakthrough they'd both needed, courageously peering into the skeletal structure that waited to be filled with collaboration and renewed strength. The next few weeks transformed into a whirlwind miracle of activities. Enlisting Aaron's help, they began the grassroots fundraiser with art, highlighting stories of their struggles, their resilience, and ultimately the hope that entwined all their efforts. Jake brought his creative background fully to bear, intertwining visuals and narratives that narrated not just the family's plight, but celebrated their determination. The recognition they reaped was profound, both in terms of fundraising and personal healing. Positive feedback flooded in. People were drawn to the authenticity of their journey and offered support in remarkable ways. The outpouring was overwhelming yet humbling, a validation of an entire family reclaiming their narrative. In a matter of months, the financial strain lightened considerably, but beyond the numbers and the materials, a far deeper change had transpired. Jake found lanes of creative expression and fortitude emerging from his work, yet it was laced with newfound confidence, the kind that relentlessly thrived within challenges. When their first exhibit finally showcased the culmination of their hard work, Jake felt an expansiveness ringing within him. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Hank and Aaron, fear and resentment transformed into layers of understanding and intimacy. They were no longer merely roles within each other's lives. They had forged paths forward embodying empathy, listening, and resiliency. As people came forward to admire the artwork and shared their reactions, Jake absorbed each positive comment, realizing that while the art told their story, it was their willingness to confront vulnerabilities that sparked genuine connection. "Dad, look at her. She's leading the charge," Jake remarked, pride bursting forth as he gestured toward Aaron, who chatted excitedly with attendees. It flooded him with warmth. His enthusiasm mirrored the joy radiating off her small victory, the willingness to step into her power. Hank reached out, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder, grounding him in recognition. "You were right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This journey opened more doors than I could ever have imagined. It's about embracing the mess and finding control in chaos we never thought possible." Jake took a breath, the gratitude blooming within his chest. It's not just about surviving anymore. It's about living. It's about becoming who we were always supposed to be together. In that moment, he knew he had achieved something significant. He unlocked the very essence of connection and support laden within family. No longer stifled by the harsh molds of past hurting, he had learned to inhabit the complexities that intertwined their lives. The difficult conversations had transformed him into a better man, one capable of wielding his voice and emerging into his truth. As the evening wore on, laughter, understanding, and growth filled the air surrounding them. As the foundation of their family shifted, Jake felt a wave of solid confidence wash over him, recognizing fully the role he would continually redefine in a future alive with potential. This was not just a momentary victory. This was a tangible accomplishment that demonstrated every ounce of their transformation. He had learned to merge artistry with vulnerability and distill the meaning of family into one resilient fabric. And now, with Hank's hand in his and Aaron's laughter echoing in their hearts, Jake understood that sometimes the most chaotic upheavals open avenues to beauty, devoid of past fears and instead layered with the colors of a future reimagined together. Now is the time to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible ending because we want to hear from true fans of personal overcoming stories. And please share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share the power of resilience.